Cruel Intentions, which is the 90s musical. It's actually known, often when you've got a movie made into a musical, it's just known as the movie's name with the musical. This one specifically has the 90s musical imposed on its name. Manipulative youngsters behaving badly. Well, two in particular. That's what this is all about. And it's based on the 1999 movie of the same name, which starred Sarah Michelle Gellar, Ryan Philippe, and Reese Witherspoon. The two who didn't see it, Greg and Peter, do you remember the movie?
Yes, I do.
I know this is based, by the way, this is based on a French novel written in 1782. I mean, that was what the movie was based on, and this is based on the movie. But this would have been, it's still pretty risque today. Could you imagine what it would have been like in 1782, guys? It's a pretty bawdy theme, and I still think it's got a lot of punch. 20-odd years after the movie came out. Look, as I say, this particular musical began its journey in 2015. It was an unauthorised work brought together by Jordan Ross and Lindsay Rossen. And the writer and director of the movie, who's Roger Cumble, saw it in preview. And he then became a champion for the piece. So, like, the three of them collaborated. So it's quite something. The setting for the film traded, if you remember, Baroque French socialites for Manhattan's Upper East Side, and so too has this musical. So you've got a couple of teenagers, Catherine, played by Kirby Burgess, and Sebastian Drew Weston, and they are promiscuous step-siblings. So Catherine puts on an air of decency and responsibility. In fact, she's anything but. And then you've got Sebastian, all about increasing the number of notches on his belt, even when that means deflowering innocent young, inverted commas, victims. And the one that he's never had, though, is Catherine, the stepsister. And he's hot for her. So she suggests a wager, and if he wins, that'll mean she will, again, quote unquote, give over. And in the meantime, she wants to get her own back on a guy that dumped her, while his challenge is to bed the pure, taken daughter of the new headmaster at the school, whose character is Annette, played by Kelsey Halg. The sexually charged storyline, I reckon it worked really well, Dave, with the up-tempo music score featuring really popular 90s hits like Journey in a Bottle, Kiss Me, Breakfast at Tiffany's, and so on and so forth. You've got I'll Make Love to You, Torn, Foolish Games, and many other numbers. And I really only saw one problem with it, and that had to do with the music. What about you?
Yeah, look, I was really, really fascinated to see how this would work, because, of course, this movie was very, very big in my teenage years. This was the movie that all of us went out and bought on VHS and could never watch when our parents were around, because of how risque the film was. You mentioned about Roger Cumble and how risky the film was. Originally, he thought he was going to have to go to France to make it in French language with a French cast, because he thought there was no way that Hollywood would make such a sexually charged movie around teenagers. Luckily they did, but I was really surprised how it worked on stage, because when I first heard about this, I was thinking, how do you do those sex scenes on stage? Because there are a lot of sex scenes in the movie. As you said, it's a very sexually charged storyline, and I thought they did it quite well. I didn't notice the audio problem as much as what you and a couple of other people did, because I knew all the songs, so I kind of knew what they were singing, but also at the same time, everybody around me was singing, which I think was just absolutely fantastic. It was probably the most fun I've seen an audience have at a musical since COVID. I've seen some musicals that I've loved since COVID, but this is the first time I think I've seen a musical where the audience around me was singing the songs. They were cheering different lines from the production that were from the film that they knew. There was a group of people sitting around me that were all dressed in costumes from the original movie, so they were true fans and they knew all the songs, so I think that added to my experience as well.
The dress-up was amazing in the audience. There were people who wore remarkable hats. They'd sort of put tape around their hats and stuck it on their heads, and yeah, I mean, that was part and parcel of the joy, if you like, of seeing this last night. look, the music drowned out the vocals throughout the entire first act, meaning you could not clearly hear much of what the performers were mouthing. And that, I understand that it's great that the audience participated, but to me that was bitterly disappointing. And I was really pleased that that was totally rectified in the second act. It was like chalk and cheese to me. It was quite the revelation. Suddenly you could actually appreciate just how good the singing was. Because if you can't hear their singing voices, it's great that the audience knows the songs, but it's not the same thing. And the simple fix was turning down the microphones on the band, which, by the way, I think it was a three-piece band, very good musically. Musical director is Daniel Puckey, who I've seen in that sort of role before. But I thought the music was great, wasn't it? I mean, all these 90s hits.
Oh, yeah, and they had such a great choice of music to go from. The soundtrack from the original Cruel Intentions movie is one of the greatest soundtracks of all time in modern times, with bands like Placebo, Fatboy Slim, The Verve. They all wrote songs for that soundtrack, and I think I read somewhere the other day, it's actually one of the most highest-selling soundtracks of all time, and is still to this day one of the most listened to soundtracks on Spotify.
Do you think that they modified the arrangements of the songs? Because I think they did.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Not all of them, but quite. There were less in the second act that I noticed, but more in the first act. And maybe that was me not hearing what was going on. But I actually think they really modify. I mean, it's funny. Sometimes, and especially on programs like The Voice and whatever, people put their own twist on songs. They did a lot of that here, didn't they?
Yeah, and they did a lot of melodies and stuff as well, where they actually brought in 2 or 3 songs and put it into the one song. So I think there was at one point... Yeah, I think Catherine at one point went back and did one of the songs that she'd done earlier in the show, and she threw in the line, "I'm a genie in the bottle," in the middle of that track, which it actually wasn't from originally. So, yeah, I think they messed around with it a lot. But I was listening to the off-Broadway recording of it last night, and they did the same thing there. So the Melbourne production is using the exact same lines and the exact same lyrics as what was used in the off-Broadway production. There's also, for people listening out there as well, there's a lot of songs that have been put into this that wasn't in the original Cruel Intentions as well. So there's songs in there by Meredith Brooks, the Goo Goo Dolls, NSYNC, that weren't in the original film that have been added into it, but they just fit so perfectly with each of the scenes. The one that I was really surprised that they did use, but I loved that they did, was a Counting Crows song that I thought they would have left out just because it's such a mellow song in the original, but they did a really haunting rendition in this one during a very crucial scene.
Well, in terms of the music, would you prefer the original, like a replication, if you like, of the original, or do you like the idea that they've twisted it?
I like that they've twisted it because, of course, the original soundtrack, the original movie wasn't a musical. It was just the soundtrack that went with it. So there was... Everybody will remember that opening scene of Sebastian driving over the Los Angeles cemetery over the freeway while Every You and Every Me by Placebo is playing. So in the start of this movie, they just have the chorus line singing that song to lead into it. So, yeah, they use a lot of the same songs. There's a very haunting ending of the original film where the Verve used Bittersweet Symphony, and here they incorporate that in, but just have the chorus line and the cast singing it. So, yeah, it works really well, and I don't mind that they put extra songs in there. I think it added to it.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's funny because when I go to a concert or whatever, and if somebody's trying to replicate what others do, I often like the original. That's just me. I often like the original. Not that this was in any way bad, and some of them are very, very good, but I kind of... it's like, I don't know, if a Cat Stevens song is sung in a different way, I miss the original Cat Stevens. You know, that's kind of just the person that I am, because that's what I remember from my youth or whatever it might be, and I want to hear that again. So you obviously feel differently.
Oh, I think you just get used to it with theatre. I mean, you look at productions like Rock of Ages, all of those tracks are different to the way that you originally heard them. Even a couple of years ago when the Green Day musical came here to Melbourne,
that's right.
The performances were very different on stage to how Green Day performs their songs. So you kind of just get used to it with theatre, that it's a theatrical version of that original song.
I love that Green Day. I saw that a couple of times, which is terrific. Greg, you go to some. What's your view about music being changed for the sake of obviously a theatrical production. Do you like it, or would you prefer to see replication of what the original song sounded like?
I don't think I've seen enough of them to comment fairly well,
Okay.
Alex.
Fair enough. Well, what about in movies though? Because I mean, there are movies of musicals and so forth. I mean, we had a Steven Spielberg one not long ago, etc., and there are quite a number of those. Do you expect the musical to be true to the original? Musical film?
Yeah, you think that although they should have some license to be able to update or improve or improvise a little bit, but yeah, when they do a remake, you want some semblance of the original there, I think.
And what about you, Peter? What's your view on that?
Well, I obviously prefer the original. I mean, West Side Story that you've been alluding to, they have to keep the same songs because they're integrated into the storyline and into the characters. It sounds to me as if Cruel Intentions sort of just overlays the music without really integrating them into the narrative or into the recitative. But, I mean, I always prefer the film, and I always go back, when you think of Cruel Intentions, to the source material, which is Dangerous Liaisons, which is the
That's
French
right.
and the American versions, which I think are much more exciting, certainly without the music.
Yeah, well, it's interesting though because the music is. I mean, I love musicals. I absolutely adore going to musicals, and the thing that I suppose I like the theatre of it, no question about it. But I really admire brilliant voices, and we've got some really great voices in this country. And a lot of them are on show in the musicals that we've just been talking about, even this morning. I mean, really impressive voices. So, Dave, we talk about the various character roles. I mean, Drew Weston and Kirby Burgess are slick and necessarily diabolical. That's the best word I can think of, as the sort of pompous two lead characters. They're pompous, they're supercilious is another way of putting it. But the character that I really enjoyed? Francine Kane plays this naive character called Cecile Caldwell, who dated the bloke who broke up with Catherine, the lead female. And isn't she an over-the-top delight? Isn't she great at what she does?
Oh, she is, and brilliantly summed up by Catherine, who calls her an innocent twit at one point. Yeah, she... And it's the same, that's the Selma Blair role in the original film, and yeah, I actually thought that Francine actually played the role better than Selma Blair. Selma Blair kind of had a little bit of front to her character, whereas I think with Francine, you saw her sexual awakening. She went from being the shy girl that was kind of scared of boys to, by the time Sebastian's finished with her, she's asking for it. So yeah, you did see a real growth there. I have to say, Kirby Burgess's voice though is just absolutely stunning. Her version of Meredith Brooks's bitch in this is spectacular. In fact, she blew away the off-Broadway production version of it that I heard. Her voice was so much stronger, and I'm not surprised she got the lead role here, because I know a lot of critics who went and saw her in The Wedding Singer and said that she actually outdid the leads in that, so not surprised that she's been given the lead role in Cruel Intentions.
And the other guy that really stood out for me was Ewan Fistrovic-Doig. He was the Sebastian's gay friend and fellow seducer Blaine Tuttle, and I thought he had a really strong voice as well, sort of bleached blonde hair, etc., and makes quite a statement, doesn't he?
He does, and again, that's another iconic role. Joshua Jackson, of course, made that role very popular in Cruel Intentions, and I actually did like that they extended that storyline, because in Cruel Intentions, I think Joshua Jackson actually only appears in 4 scenes with that character, so it was really well done that they actually had the Blaine and the Greg characters in it more, because I think that actually added to it, and it also was able to tell another story where it actually felt like the love was genuine, even though one of them wouldn't admit it early on. So, yeah, I think that added to the production as well, having those characters in it more often than the film did.
Now, let's talk about the set design and the video offering. Wow. Simple set, greatly enhanced by this effusive, ever-changing video, steady stream of words and images projected upon it. That was really something. It was really busy and intense and frenetic, exactly what the Doctor ordered, don't you think?
Oh, exactly. And that scene where, and I won't spoil anything, but where Catherine loses it and you had the red lights flashing and the entire set turning red, and her projected on the back screen turning into the devil. I thought that was amazingly well done, because of course sometimes with theatre you don't have that freedom to show something that a director can show in a film by using exterior things. They did that so well with that last night, with some of the lyrics even appearing on the wall behind them. But yeah, that scene where Catherine loses it, that was just remarkable. That was one of the best things I think I've seen in Melbourne theatre in a long time.
And we should mention, of course, it was the lighting has a big part
Yep.
to play, as well as the projections. I mean, the mood lighting is just fabulous. And look, it's the collective endeavour of the set designer James Brown, the video designer Craig Wilkinson, and I don't have with me, but I should look it up, the lighting designer as well. And sound obviously plays a big part in this as well. But the choreography is also critically important. And I reckon Freya List has absolutely nailed it, because things move around at such frenetic pace that you've got to get the choreography right. Otherwise, you'll be bumping into the furniture, literally, won't you?
Oh yeah, everything moves so quickly, and one of the things that they do so well in this is that they'll incorporate 3 or 4 scenes from the movie into one scene on stage. So you may have the entire cast on stage, each having their own conversations, and every time the light goes onto them for their conversation, the set behind them changes. So you've got people in the background constantly moving things, and I noticed a couple of times where I thought, gee, they're going to clean up that other actor, but no, everybody's in the right spot at the right time and doesn't get cleaned up by any of the set pieces. So well done.
It would have taken quite a bit of preparation. I mean, that's obviously what rehearsal's for. Declan O'Neill, by the way, is the lighting designer, so credit to him. And the director of the piece is Alistair Smith. The resident director in the choreography is Tanya Mitford. And what they've done, to me, is they've breathed new life into a fan favourite of the late 90s. And most appropriately, boy, there was a lot of love in the room for what director and et al. Have achieved. And look, I just presume that the band volume problem, which plagued the first act on opening night, isn't an issue for any others who venture along to the Athenaeum Theatre to see what is really fun-filled, laughter-inducing jukebox musical. I mean, it's really something pretty special. A lot of people are going to love this show, aren't they, Dave?
Oh, definitely. I'm already looking at getting tickets to go back and see it, and I don't do that very often with a musical, but I loved it.
Yeah, good on you. Fantastic. So if you were to give it a score out of 10, what would you have given?
I would actually have to give it a 10. I loved it that much.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not very often. I'll go along and see a musical and enjoy it, but I don't very often go back for a second viewing, whereas I can't wait to go back and see this again.
There you go. Greg, hopefully that's enchanted you as well, and you might go along and see it too, mate.
Maybe you ought to get around. There's also Hamilton on my list to go see as well, remember?
There is a lot going on I mean, this is it. Theatre in Melbourne is amazing. It's extraordinary. Now, look, I'll come back to, if we've got time today, I'm going to